Greg is coming to you live from in the middle of moving to a different state entirely.
The different state entirely.
Clear across the country.
We're moving to Vermont, folks, and I'm begging you to please give me some money.
If there's anything Greg likes to do is pack up his entire life in the back of a Ford and move across the country.
Can't think of something I would love to do more than spend all my savings all at once on one thing.
Hey, well, at least this motivated you to put some savings together. So you know what? We can look at it. We can look at it with a silver lining.
Is that a silver lining?
Oh man, this laptop sucks so much. I'm frozen. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear and see you. It's all right. But with that being said, this is episode 62 of Guerrilla Radio Show. It is
that's a lot of episodes.
The promised Thai Forestry episode, primarily focusing on the life and death of the famous Thai conservationist Seub Nakhasathien. And for any Thai listeners that may be out there, please send us a recording of you correcting every single thing that we pronounce incorrectly in this episode. And we will edit it in.
We will be reading it wrong.
Yeah, we tried our hardest, and by that I mean we put zero effort into it.
No, I put effort into it. Listen, here's the thing.
For those of you at home, I wasn't even included in the invite to this recording until 11 a.m. today.
Well, because Greg was moving.
3:19 p.m.
You said
4 hours, 2 of which was helping walk Austin through the ESPN fantasy app.
So to be clear, Greg said he couldn't make this episode because of the moving, but then it's Labor Day.
I refuse to miss a fucking episode. I haven't missed one yet.
Yeah, so Greg is, holding this recording together with like duct tape and like sticks, but
I don't know when you were little, but when I was little, I would go onto IMDb pages of TV shows, and you didn't exist 25 years ago. What are you talking about?
Yes, I did.
Barely.
That's when I was little. I was a year old. I'm 26.
Jesus, are you?
Yeah. And
you wonder why we make fun of you for being old. Anyway.
At least I'm not
So this episode is going to be a bit more informational based because I had to... The Wikipedia page for Seub is very lackluster in English.
Very sparse.
I can't read Thai or the Thai alphabet even.
The white man wants to keep you ignorant.
A little bit. And there is a good PBS documentary about Seub, but it is entirely in Thai with no English subtitles. So if someone wants to...
Wait, hold on.
Put that
PBS
together.
Documentary?
Yeah.
Didn't we pay for that as taxpayers? Why is that shit not subtitled?
PBS Thailand.
Oh.
Yeah, Thailand has a PBS.
They got their own
the
PBS
Thai Public Broadcasting Service.
Okay.
Yeah,
you can't call that PBS in America because we have PBS. You have to call that the Thai PBS.
True.
Because it's a fundamentally different thing.
Different thing entirely, I think.
Dude, he was there. He was there for like 15 days. He went native.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he as they say, he's gone native.
It's not entirely, but
He's a Thai guy now.
Yeah, essentially. So I had to, essentially what that all means is I had to piece this information together myself from various primary sources to bring this story directly and accurately to you all.
The Guerrilla Radio Show listeners.
So please be grateful. This all started, I got the idea.
Similar to PBS, we are funded by viewers like you.
It's true. You should check out our Patreon if you like the information in this episode.
Please check our Patreon.
Check it out. We got some cool stuff on there.
Check the description.
And this does it. No, we don't do anything.
We accept payment in Thai baht as well.
No, we fucking don't.
Yes, we do. It'll convert it automatically.
Thailand will
go
with it.
How many Thai baht is it to
Patreon
subscribe to us?
Lot.
I think if they want to do $5 a month, it's like
150 something, 200.
It's like I don't know actually, a couple hundred baht. I don't remember though. It's okay, so it's pennies, but times 3, basically, is roughly it.
So it's 3 cents.
A baht is worth 3 cents.
Oh yeah, yeah. Basically, I mean that's not how I would think
Instead
of it.
Instead of the way you would think of it is really convoluted. You're like,
is a penny times 3?
That's not. Yeah, no, that's not helpful for conversion though. Is what I'm saying is.
What's helpful for conversion is it's 3 cents.
Multiply the. Okay.
Every baht is 3 cents.
Okay, anyways. You led me to believe that the Thai baht was a lot stronger than it was when you came back, but I think that was just you not knowing how to do math. Anyway.
What do you mean? No, it's the U.S.
I
dollar.
I thought it was like 50. I thought it was like 50 baht to $1.
I did not say that at all.
You basically said that.
You wouldn't have been able to fucking make
sort.
it if it was only half $1.
I was like, is it like, oh, is this like around the rupee?
I told you, no. I bought, there was pairs of Yeezys for $20.
They're not real Yeezys. You can buy fake Yeezys for $20 in America. Fair because enough. They're not real Yeezys.
Well, you could buy dinner for $3.
It's about 80 to 90 rupees per dollar, which is a conversion.
Do you get them from smashing clay pots?
You know it. And there's a lot of clay. That's why they're so undervalued. There's lots of clay pots in India. You know?
So no, but this is a serious. Hold on, no. This is a serious episode though, so we're gonna hop into the content.
We're jump right into.
All right.
So I got the idea for this episode when I was being taken. So I was staying in Khao Nong Rum in the Hoi Ka Keng, wildlife national forest. Reserve? It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a wildlife reserve. And, one of the days we were there, we were taken around to visit basically historic sites there. It's been described as Thailand's Yellowstone. And as we'll see, kind of in more ways than one. It's not an exact parallel to Yellowstone, obviously, but it's similar in what they tried to do, I suppose. So you drive up this dirt road for 30 minutes and you stop at this one stop along the way to Khao Nong Rum. And there's this little sidewalk with these really intricately carved stones laid in a pattern leading to this little blue house at the end of a downward slope, sort of.
That's bad feng shui.
So when you see this house, there's a statue of Seub, and you look towards the house and the sidewalk narrows as you get closer to the house until you literally have to step off the sidewalk. And it was described to me as my professor as a intentional artistic decision to show that the narrowing choices that Seub had leading to the ultimate decision to take his own life, which we will get into. But first, there is
Did Seub build this path, or was it?
No, it was constructed after
his house was protected as okay.
Yeah.
I see. You know what? I think that's actually perfect feng shui. It's
So basically, this little blue house belonged to Seub Nakhasathien. If you ever visit, you can look through the window and see the house exactly as he left it, with worn shoes at the door, a set of field clothes, and a hat. There's an open water bottle. I'm not sure that was his water bottle or if that was, anyways, it's basically preserved almost entirely as the day he left it. But first it's necessary to get into a little bit of background on Thai forestry from the book Thai Forestry, A Critical History by Anne Denaya Usher. So for about the entire 20th century, the Royal Forestry Department of Thailand, because they've still got a monarchy there, it's been a lot of political turmoil in Thailand, you may know. Essentially, the Royal Forestry Department of Thailand had essentially complete jurisdiction over the land use and subsequently the lives of the inhabitants of over half of the surface area of the country. The origins of this sort of strangling bureaucracy are rooted in, as you may have guessed, by the type of content we normally cover in a historic conservation setting, colonialism. The British forester Herbert Slade imposed a set of laws and regulations based in the German forestry tradition, which is at this point known for both its all-encompassing scientific permeation of the entire globe's forestry practices and, more recently, its dire ecological consequences. So the German forestry tradition is one that seeks to impose a strict grid of even-aged normal forests on, quote, wild, unruly nature. There was no room for people inside this vision, and that which lay outside the grid, other flora, animal life, or human communities, were explicitly viewed as waste. But as we know, contrary to the great myth of a vast, unpopulated wilderness that is so pervasive today, this is fundamentally untrue. Yellowstone National Park is presented as wilderness, as completely uninhabited, vast, empty space of untouched nature. Obviously, this was not always the case. The land is not empty, but it was emptied. It was depopulated.
Were you silent or were you silenced?
Yeah, that all human communities were removed from, the Yellowstone, like all American national parks, all signs of human cultivation removed with this scientific forestry and this strict control over like ecological balance that we've tried to strike, which is obviously had varying success, as we just found out that, it turns out that actually Yellowstone does need wolves to remain ecologically balanced. Who would have known? So they had to, reintroduce wolves. But anyways, forests are lived in by humans. And as we spoke of in our Congo series, remember that, these forests have been lived inside of and cultivated for thousands of years by human civilizations for far longer than the German idea of scientific forestry. This is, another idea imported to Asia by colonialism and imperialism, this time from the American conservation tradition, as I just spoke of regarding Yellowstone, Yosemite. This process of preserving an idyllic, untouched wilderness is and always has been indicative not of an empty landscape, but one that has been emptied.
Fortunately, the relocation of millions of people from Thailand's forests was by and large not successful. However, what was successful was the industrialization of forestry as an outgrowth of capitalist imperialist industry. Thailand's forestry developed much of Malaysia, where the Dutch imported palm oil plants and not only cleared vast swaths of forests for palm oil plantations themselves. We've talked about these palm oil plantations before, and these palm tree plantations, and how in its current iteration and how it exists now, it's like kind of utilizing weird, like it's using monkey labor in weird ways.
Well, that's more coconuts, actually.
Oh, it's just
the coconut monkey labor is in Thailand as well, which I assume is an outgrowth of the same phenomenon.
Okay. So in Malaysia, the Dutch imported palm oil plants and not only cleared these huge swaths of forests, but through their imperialist financial relations, they made palm oil the only economical viable way with which to gain entry into the capitalist world economy for these nations. So places like Thailand and Malaysia and all over the Southeast Asia, the only way they are allowed to participate in a global economy is by selling their land, the rights to their land, to these, European corporations.
And, well, of course, also selling the products, essentially selling the products that they create on the majority of their land directly to Europe, in a way.
So Thailand, through this process, was allowed entry into the world economy through its crops of like teak wood, eucalyptus, in the eucalyptus tree. This was imposed at first by British logging concerns and replaced by Danish capital after World War II.
Yeah. So there are essentially identified in this book 6 watershed events in the history of Thai forestry and the fight for communal land management of forests, ultimately culminating in the revolutionary impact of Seub, which we will get to after we talk about these watershed events first.
So we'll start with the first one, the Nam Chan Dam project, which was set to be the largest hydroelectric dam in Thailand. However, it was zoned for construction inside the Tung Yai Naraswan Wildlife Sanctuary, the core of Southeast Asia's largest region of contiguous forest. Initially proposed in 1966, it was shelved indefinitely in 1988 in response to overwhelming public pressure. The dam would have not only clear-cut a massive swath of forest, but flooded major portions of the Tung Yai Narasan
Hoi Ka Keng
wildlife sanctuaries, which were made UNESCO World Heritage Sites in 1991. Perhaps goes without saying that the flooded and clear-cut areas were not only being used by an incredibly biodiverse range of animals, but human communities as well. In fact, much of the surveying was largely incomplete or theoretical, as communist insurgents controlled the majority of the western forests and would not allow exploration by the businesses and government interests behind the dam. One forester even claimed that the damage to the forests in the flood zone would take 500 years and 45 septillion baht to restore to its original condition.
See, those are the only kind of numbers you can talk about when you're dealing with like
currencies
meaningless currency.
Yeah, it's
meaningless currencies.
45 septillion baht.
I don't know how serious he was being, but if you're gonna try to put a price and a date range on restoring millions and millions of years of forest growth, you might as well just say 45 septillion, you know?
Yeah. So when dam workers started cutting trees down to build a road towards the dam's construction site, the director of the Wildlife Conservation Division ordered all the workers arrested.
Yeah. So there's...
When was this? Was this in the 90s?
Yes.
91,
Like
right?
this was all in 91?
Well, actually, no. It was initially proposed in 1966, and it was very slow to get started until it was eventually just shelved indefinitely, because the sort of Thai Forestry bureaucracy
got in the way.
And
they got UNESCO involved, I imagine. And once UNESCO gets involved, a lot of more protection.
Well, UNESCO got involved after Seub, and part of the reason why there was this motivation to stop, the project from clearing trees is, one, there's the lack of communication between different royal government departments, basically, but also the public was very much opposed to the Namchan Dam, and Seub actually got his start sort of as an activist, in a sense, protesting and raising awareness about the basically dangerous impact that the dam would have on the rest of the forests. So the next watershed event was the logging ban. And this one was also interesting because it was sort of done not in the benevolent way you would normally think something as drastic as a logging ban would be done. A lot of it is also just that the sort of Western forestry science would sort of have you think that any use at all of trees, any cutting of trees in any sense is, completely taboo, and it needs to be grown uniformly and evenly and stuff like that. It's not exactly true. There've been, really thousands to tens of thousands of years of human communities cutting down trees for their own use, but in a sustainable way that hasn't, destroyed or deforested any forest, I guess. And so part of the target of the logging ban was local communities, where it was a way to clamp down on them to stop them from using their local resources, even though they needed them to survive and participate in, the local economy. It wasn't so much a blow to global, finance capital as it was a uniform ban to concede to public pressure. Essentially, following the public opposition to the dam project, public opposition to logging also came to a head. Essentially, the majority of the Thai government's forestry bureaucracy was geared towards the economic and political projects pertaining to the lumber industry, and thus even logging's harshest critics assumed there would never be an end to the logging industry. But 5 months into Prime Minister Chatichai's government, the Thai government canceled all logging concessions. The reasons for this, as admitted by the government at the time, is that as the first democratically elected government in 12 years, it was basically a move purely to increase government popularity and give concessions to public pressure. Well, again, a lot of the thrust of this was to stop community use of forests. It also gave concessions to the large public struggles of communities against multinational logging concessions. Another big thing that sort of led to this being so important to the public was a disastrous flood in 1988. Basically killed hundreds of people and destroyed countless communities because there was no longer old growth forest to prevent the rainwater from rapidly accumulating down the mountain and just flooding, which is why, the person in the previous little watershed event gave that ridiculous number of 500 years and 45 septillion baht, because it's you can't really just replace...
You can never fix this, actually.
You can never fix the disappearance of old growth forest. But after this, I'll let you take over.
Well, also one thing. This is just me critiquing your writing, because we love to do this. I think half the time you use the word concession, you mean to use the word concern.
Yep.
Well,
no, he just keeps saying concession over and over. I've been reading through the notes here.
It's called a logging concession.
Oh, really?
It's what it's called.
Oh, that's the area. I see.
That's like a concession.
Well, if we're going to use the word logging concession, we can't use concession in any other sense of the word.
Okay.
It's just, you used it 7 times in that one paragraph.
Well, that's because that's what they're called.
Yeah, but then you also said they had to, they made concessions to the people. That's not a logging concession. That's a different thing.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, but
fair
anyway,
enough.
I just wanted you to know that.
The third watershed moment is the Hoi Khao communal ownership fight. Hoi Khao was one of the few communities who successfully fought against state-sponsored forestry projects. These projects were granted provisional rights to manage and use their forest. Okay. However, in 1986, the conservative Thai Nation Party identified 40 hectares of degraded forest to be targeted for reforestation. This raised some objections from the people living there. First, obviously, it was not degraded, but rather being used by the community itself for sustenance. Second, the reforestation consisted of not ecologically relevant trees that allow for habitat regeneration, but mango trees for the purpose of creating fruit plantations. The outrage was further solidified when rumors emerged that Sirpan Shinawatra, the conservative MP responsible for proposing this action, was planning on turning the area into a tourist resort. Without approving anything legally, Shinawatra sent tractors and heavy earth-moving equipment to prepare the area for mango tree saplings, knocking down large old-growth trees and causing massive amounts of soil erosion. The local backlash against the orchard plans was led by Nit Shaivana, who was soon joined by villagers, academics, and university students. Nit was soon arrested, and protesters surrounded the jail, holding him, daring police to arrest them all. Under scrutiny of the entire Thai public, the arrested protesters were released immediately. However, Nit was found murdered the next day. In response, the Director General of Forestry made an emergency visit to Hoi Khao, where he bowed to mounting public pressure and granted the villagers legal control over the 40 hectares of forest.
Can I just make a comment here?
Yeah.
Chandran, you've been teaching children for too long. You read that like you would read a story to a child. Like where you put all your emphasis in your words. You're like, and they told him, and then they said, we're not going to do that. Like
it's radio, man. That's the job.
Yeah, you could stand to read a book to a child. I don't know. That's okay. I don't know. Get children correct.
Go off. So, can you give us a little background, Austin? Because it's been mentioned a few times through this, just in these first, 3, that there seems to be something going on with the Thai government. Is this like, were they having a series of dictatorships at some point?
Greg, there have been so many coups and bloodless coups in Thailand. Like, it's not even like. The last king before this king was, like, allegedly killed by this king to take power, I guess. I don't know.
Isn't that his dad?
Yeah. Okay. But, like, also when new kings take over, they keep, like, exiling their, like, bastard children to other countries. Like, I know
that's understandable. If I were a monarch, I would also exile my bastard children, my fail sons.
Yeah. One of the Thai princesses ended up getting exiled and going to Cornell and ending up just like living in New York, I guess.
Good for her.
But yeah, no. So
how many governments ago was this stuff?
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even try to keep track of that. I'm so sorry. Maybe Thai listeners will know what was going on, but there have been so many bloodless coups and like violent military coups. Like it's always happening. I'm sorry to say. Even like democracy protests, sometimes they get cracked down on pretty brutally. Other times, I don't know. Sometimes they get in a democratically elected government, but then it goes back to not being democratic.
Is Thailand currently a democracy?
I don't think it would be considered a democracy.
Are people voting currently in Thailand?
Do they have a parliament?
Hold on. I mean, I guess it's a democracy in a technical sense.
Oh, like on paper it's a democracy?
But also the king declared the entire month of July as his birthday month and, erected portraits of himself and like
That's my fucking birthday month. Tell him to go to hell.
Oh, okay. So they are currently a constitutional monarchy where the prime minister is the head of the government and the hereditary monarch is the head of the state. And also the monarch doesn't really spend much time in Thailand at all. He usually just spends time in resorts in like Nordic countries, which,
He's got a thing for a white woman, apparently.
Oh yeah,
Who doesn't?
Sorry
brother?
to any Thai listeners who are sympathetic to the monarch, but I've heard he has many STIs.
Bro's riddled with syphilis.
I mean, I think anybody who spends too much time in a Nordic country, it just kind of happens.
Yeah.
You can't really avoid it. Those people up there are just like they're mangy.
Disgusting sex perverts, a lot of them.
So, yeah.
Actually, I want to Google this. What don't the Nordic countries have like absurdly statistical high rates?
They have
of
a crazy
STIs?
high rate of STIs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also want to talk really quickly about Nit, who was found mysteriously murdered. And
See,
by the,
that was a real shock and surprise, real twist to the story as I was reading it.
Yeah.
Didn't expect that one to come up next.
So, like, first of all, let me just say that, like, nicknames and first names are more common. Like, last names are rarely used in Thailand because last names were, or like family names were sort of imposed by the king who decided he wanted to westernize the country. But people still use like nicknames and first names to refer to friends, basically. Like, there was a guy named Bubble who that wasn't his real name, but we all called him Bubble, which was fun.
Why was it
But
called
with
Bubble?
the murdering people, so part of the reason why I wasn't in Thailand longer was because we couldn't get the permits for my colleague's full research project, basically. Because there's a huge delay, because I think someone murdered the guy who usually approves permits. But because they couldn't find the whole body, they couldn't convict him or something. I don't know. Someone may know more about this than me.
Okay, that's
just what I
insane.
heard. Yeah.
Can I also just make a statement where we were just talking about how many coups have there been in Thailand?
Yeah. Have you found
If
out?
you go onto Google right now and you just type in how many coups has, the first two results are has the CIA done, followed immediately by has Thailand had.
What's the answer, Greg?
We're going to find out. There have been 18 coups and 18 constitutions since 1945.
That's absurd.
So if it ever seems like the governments aren't like matching up chronologically or making sense, that's why.
It's like barely 5 years of government.
Yeah.
We're not
I'm
even
sorry.
averaging 5 years.
It's since 1932 there have been 18.
Okay. Well, that's
my
at
statement
least
is still true.
it's still about, yeah. So the democratic governments really like to appease the public, and so they will bow to like demands that like seem like outrageous and ridiculous at the time.
They're bowing to somebody.
That takes me into the Swan Kitty scandal, I believe is how you say it. Not long after the 1989 Hoi Kao decision, in January of 1990, 156 workers of the Swan Kitty Reforestation Company were arrested for illegally clearing areas of natural forest growth to make way for their, quote, reforestation, which was in reality a plantation of fast-growing eucalyptus trees. So, in plain English, they were cutting down actual natural forest, or rather human-cultivated sustainable forest, and just replacing it with rows of uniform eucalyptus trees. And when I say uniform, it's scary. We'll get into that. So,
okay.
Once again, public outrage turned towards the industry of commercialized reforestation, a blatant skirting of the logging ban, and a continuation of deforestation's most immediate cause, which is, putting completely alien eucalyptus trees in Thai forests. So the owner of Swan Kitty, Damler Charnvinich, I think, it's a very long last name, so I'm just going to call him Kitty, was one of the most influential agro-business tycoons in Thailand, serving as a senator, a prime ministerial advisor, and patron of several political parties. Kati stated that the last great challenge of his life was to establish a 640 square kilometer eucalyptus plantation to supply 1,000 tons of pulp mill to the Thai paper industry per day. His operating philosophy was that of pure, all-encompassing homogeneity, which is a word that he used himself. Kati was laser focused on growing genetically optimal eucalyptus trees, going as far as to literally clone the same exact tree to ensure each tree on the plantation was genetically identical. Ruthlessly extracting wastewater from the pulping mill was refunneled back into the plantation to water the next generation of eucalyptus clones. This polluted water became so toxic that the runoff to nearby villages made growing rice completely impossible, and the villagers were forced to sell their land and move or work for the Swankatee plantation to earn a living.
See, you can't fuck with Asian people's rice.
God damn.
It really upends their whole lifestyle.
What are they going to do?
It's a fundamental component of who we are as beings that roam this planet. You know, we gotta have rice.
The soil was so degraded by this ruthless extraction that the villagers themselves had to spend all of their earnings on improving the soil quality in order to be able to grow more trees to the company to continue making money. Very,
oh, wow.
very nightmarish. The company
This is real company town shit.
Yeah, and
actual, like, these people are being held hostage by this corporation.
Yeah, and this company still exists, by the way. The company's main shareholders are the Soon Hwasang Group, 56%, Stora Enso, Europe's largest pulp and paper producer, 19%,
Blackstone.
and New Oji Paper, Japan's largest paper producer, and CDC. I don't know if that means the CDC that we know of.
Clearly not.
I don't think the
CDC,
CDC is allowed to own.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry,
the article didn't elaborate on what CDC meant.
Did you click on it, maybe?
Well, no, it didn't have a link or anything. It just said CDC.
Probably some Chinese megacorp.
Could be.
True.
At present, the mill obtains its raw material supplies from 32,000 hectares of eucalyptus plantations and an additional 57,000 hectares of eucalyptus grown by 6,000 with an annual production capacity of 500,000 tons of pulp. It almost goes without saying that over 70% of this product is exported directly to the West, making them one of the largest suppliers in the world.
That's crazy, actually.
So, like, in case you think that, like, you know, these imperial financial relations are something of the past, it's only gotten significantly worse. We've just heard less about it.
Mm-hmm. It all exists on like ledger books now. Like, we don't shoot people about it.
Yeah.
So, you know, you don't hear about it. No one cares. And no one, you know, listen, you can read a history book, but you don't read the newspaper, do you?
Fair enough.
You know? You ever thought about that?
Yeah. So, Greg, I'm going to ask you to read the next
land resettlement program.
The land resettlement program.
And you got to read it as if you are reading to a group of 5-year-olds.
Do I have to read it exactly as Austin wrote it as well?
No, just
if
you.
I'm going to read it exactly the way Austin wrote it. No commas,
I can read it because
endless
that's how
sentences.
my internal monologue.
Yeah,
works.
Your internal monologue works for you because every time you say 3 words, you have to pause and go, So, like, you're putting your own commas in.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so number 5, folks, the land resettlement program for the poor living in degraded forest reserves. Parentheses, Kor. What does that mean? Is that a place?
That was the Thai acronym for the program. I don't know how to pronounce it, so you can just call it the land
Kor.
Yeah.
Again, if you're Thai and you're listening, feel free to call me Whitey and then tell me how to say this, right?
Yeah, farang is the word for foreigners, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. I'm gonna farang you.
We need like a soundboard where we can just hit like, and it will just like some cartoon character screaming cracker. You know?
Yeah.
It would really work.
Simply put, landless people living in state forests were viewed by Thai restoration efforts as an obstacle to be overcome. By 1987, the Ministry of Agriculture identified nearly 30,000 square kilometers of degraded land where eucalyptus could be planted. When the regrowth efforts fell short of their targets, the army stepped in to do what the foresters had failed to do successfully: depopulate areas targeted for eucalyptus plantations with military force. Widespread implementation of the scheme began after the 1991 military coup in Thailand.
Not to be confused with the other military
Not to be confused with the other 17 military coups in Thailand. Over 6 million people were ordered to leave and resettle outside of state forest land. While it was estimated that these people were using at least 12,900 square kilometers of agricultural land, they would be squeezed into an area of only 7,680 square kilometers. Military relocation sites were designed haphazardly into uniform square blocks of 100 families each, with no regard to the quality of the soil or the language and cultural differences of the groups being lumped together. For reference, there are 62 officially recognized languages spoken in Thailand. Communities that had formed over decades or even centuries were torn from their homes. Soldiers moved into villages and gave the inhabitants an ultimatum to either pack up their belongings and leave, or be removed by force. If they met with any resistance, armed men destroyed schools, temples, and agricultural fields to render the village uninhabitable. So, the inhabitants of Nong Yai were among those whose months-long resistance played a crucial role in the eventual demise of the land resettlement program. After being dragged away by the military and put in a new place, For 9 months, where the land was unsuitable for agriculture and also already occupied, the villagers returned to their homes in open defiance of the military. One villager described her feelings as this: "We are afraid, but if we don't move now, we won't have anything left. We have to take this risk, for we have nothing to lose." About a week later, thousands of landless farmers walked to Pak Chong and threatened to march on Bangkok if the land resettlement program was not revoked. Coinciding with the public backlash to the bloody police repression of pro-democracy protesters the month prior, boosted public support for the movement, and the newly appointed Prime Minister Anand Paniyarachan was Paniyarachan. The plan was suspended. Suspended the plan, all right? Though the program was canceled, the primary concern underlying the issue relating to scientific forestry and the perceived conflict between conservation and human cultivated forest communities remained. The author of Thai Forestry, A Critical History, even goes so far as to say that perhaps the true purpose of the program was as a yardstick to measure the amount of forest that is politically tolerable. To this day, Thai foresters maneuver between community-owned forest and depopulation at gunpoint, determined to steer away from the former, yet fully aware that the latter goes beyond what Thai society is willing to accept. Where else do these limits get pushed to the breaking point?
So, this brings us to watershed event number 6, the death of an honest forester. This is the story of Seub Nakhasathien. So this story, I'm basically just going to... I think we should just read directly from the book and the posters put up in Seub's honor at Hoi Ka Keng. So, starting from the end... On Saturday, September 1st, 1990, just before daybreak, the chief of Hoi Ka Keng Wildlife Sanctuary, Seub Nakhasathien, took his own life using the hand pistol he carried with him for protection. Seub's death sent shockwaves through the Thai conservation community and literally moved the nation. The suicide differs from the other events described so far, but it is nonetheless a watershed of Thai forestry history. The public's reaction to this forester's death reflected the loss of national patience with corruption and collusion within the forestry bureaucracy, and it heralded the coming shift of focus in Thailand from production to conservation forestry. Seub was a totally different kind of forester. Accustomed to the stereotypic image of the corrupt timbermonger, Seub had won people's hearts through his struggles to make publicly known the dire circumstances of Thailand's wildlife. They saw him rescuing animals left stranded by construction of the Khao Lam hydro dam, exposing illegal loggers at great personal risk, speaking out against the Nam Chan dam project, and risking his life to protect helpless wildlife. In short, taking a stand where many of his contemporaries either actively colluded with illegal traders or chose to remain silent. Quote, "I am speaking today on behalf of the animals in the forest because they cannot speak for themselves," he told a gathering of 1,000 people at the Environment 90 conference held in January 1990. Showing slides of caged baby primates and severed tapir hooves, he spoke directly from the heart. He was the only speaker at an otherwise ordinary conference for whom the audience had stood up and cheered. Seub's death 9 months later provoked an exceptional outpouring of grief and affection from people in all walks of life. Newspapers were inundated with letters and poems. One of Thailand's most popular singers wrote a song in his honor. Seub Nakhasathien was a lesson for the forestry department, a lesson for the Thai government, it goes. A television fundraising program collected over 10 million baht in one evening, which was used to set up a foundation in his name. The statue of Seub now stands at the Hoi Ka Keng Sanctuary headquarters right by his house. In a letter written 5 days after his death, His Majesty the King made it known that he would sponsor the final 2 days of the 7-day funeral rites, sending his privy councillor and former Prime Minister Prem Tinsulananda as his representative to the ceremony. In his Soy Swan Flu column in the Siam Rath newspaper, M.R. Kukrit Pramoj, if I'm saying that right, compared Seub to a soldier who died for his country in the line of duty. As soldiers are recognized for their deeds, he wrote, so Seub should be remembered as a national hero.
The analogy of war was not to be taken lightly. Seub often said his struggle to protect the integrity of Thailand's western forests was like a military conflict, except that it was being waged with none of the support systems necessary for those risking their lives in the front lines. It was not a fair fight. While the enemy was fully equipped with M16s and other military weaponry, and benefited from political connections and external financial backing from Bangkok and beyond, the forest rangers of Hau Kai Keng were virtually on their own, overseeing 2,575 square kilometers of forest were 12 officers, including Seub, 30 rangers, and 120 guards, some of whom were paid no more than 1,500 baht, less than $50 per month, with no benefits or insurance for their families in the event of death. On top of endless paperwork and uninterested responses from officialdom to their pleas for assistance, these men had also to contend with malfunctioning radios, vehicles badly in need of repair, and a woefully inadequate fuel budget. It is in the hands of this sorry crew that the government placed full responsibility for one of Thailand's most precious remaining natural treasures. It was largely as a result of the efforts of Seub and the British zoologist Belinda Stewart Cox that Hau Kai Keng and the adjacent Tung Yai Narasan were recognized by UNESCO as a Natural World Heritage Site. Seub's concern for the survival of wildlife inside the sanctuary stemmed from a solid conviction that the animals have rights to life as human beings do. He asserted that the world was not made by us or for us, nor does it belong to us. He believed that hunting wildlife for sale was morally equivalent to murder. People who buy baby animals, like gibbons and slow lorises, to raise as pets at home must take the responsibility all the way, not give them back to the forestry department when they become adults and start to bite and are no longer cute. It's like having a daughter or son and giving it to the social welfare department to raise, he said. So many times, Seub raged at how absurdly out of joint the government's priorities were. When protected forest is damaged, we get a budget of 1 baht per rai to restore it. But if it's forest reserve land, they allocate 1,000 baht for planting eucalyptus, and then they called that forest, he said. During the last months of his life, Seub became caught in a bureaucratic web. The more he struggled, the more he felt trapped. He was losing control of the things that meant the most to him. He found himself fighting against poachers in the villages surrounding the boundaries of the sanctuary, some of whom were family members of his own workers. But Seub was no misanthropic conservationist. He worked in the full knowledge that those doing the trapping and killing were not the real culprits. Arresting poor villagers or even exposing small-time local police involved in the illegal logging or wildlife trade would have no effect on those ultimately responsible. In early 1990, Seub had a meeting with then Agriculture Minister Sanan Kachorn Prasad, in which he tried to explain the complexity and gravity of the problems he and his men faced in the sanctuary. It was a turning point. He was told by the minister, among other things, that he would just have to work harder. Seub said that the encounter made clear the pervasive extent of corruption in the Royal Forestry Department and the lack of support for his efforts. He came to the conclusion that just as the animals in the forest are victims of the wildlife trade, so he, his workers, and even colleagues in the Wildlife Conservation Division were pawns in a game so big that the real players could not even be named. After the meeting, he said, "I know now that we are fighting this alone."
Then, in July, 2 of his rangers were shot at, one at point-blank range. Though both men escaped serious injury, the shootings fundamentally altered the nature of this muted war. Seub felt like he had been forced into a position where he might be sending the men he loved to their deaths. And for what? If a guard or a ranger was killed, that death was on Seub's shoulders alone. The burden was all the heavier in the knowledge that they would have died in part out of allegiance to him. It was also a foregone conclusion that, in the event of a death, no one would take notice. Forest protection would not be advanced, for the victims' bereaved families there would have little compensation or even comfort in knowing that their sons and husbands had not died in vain. Suicide is the most private of acts. The decision, like the reasons, cannot be known to us. But from the outside, Seub's death captured public attention because he defended aspects of the forest that Thai Forestry had for so long undervalued. He was perceived as a rare and endangered creature, an honest forester struggling against the corruption within his own department. Now, before we go on to the posters that are sort of erected in his honor at Hoi Ka Keng, I'd also like to point out that in Buddhism, the predominant religion of Thailand, suicide is a much more drastic act, which is why, like the self-immolation was such a, drastic and historic thing that happened. In Buddhism, if you shoot yourself, if you commit suicide, it's essentially akin to taking yourself out of the cycle of reincarnation, dooming yourself. So it's basically seen as like one of the most drastic things you can possibly do. For example, it's theorized that I think the previous king, it's theorized that he killed himself, but it's also more often theorized or put forth that the current king had him killed because the alternative would be believing that the king, was so unhappy that he removed himself from, the cycle of reincarnation.
He thought samsara was for one lifetime only. He mad.
Nope. No. So, the posters start out like this. The first one is becoming a forest officer. In 1975, Seub Nakhasathien qualified to be a government officer in the Royal Forestry Department. His high scores in the entrance exam allowed him to choose which section he would join, and so he chose the wildlife sanctuary in Chonburi, a job he carried out with tremendous dedication and honesty, but, same thing. Seeking a deeper understanding in matters of nature conservation, Seub won a scholarship to study for a master's degree in resource and environmental conservation at the University of London, which he began in 1979. After graduating in 1981, he returned and was made superintendent of the Bong Phru non-hunting area in Chonburi. However, Seub's yearning for knowledge was still not satisfied, and in 1983 he was granted a return to the technical division of the Wildlife Conservation Bureau, where he would follow his true passion, conservation research. During his years in the Bureau, he produced a multitude of research papers. The next poster is Early Days. Seub Nakhasathien was born on Saturday, 31st of December, 1949, in Tongam, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that, but he was the eldest of three children of Salab, the governor of Prachinburi, and Buniyam Nakhasathien.
So he was the son of a governor, you said?
Yeah. I think that also adds a bit to the severity of his suicide. In 1986, Seub Nakhasathien led a wildlife evacuation team in the forest condemned to flooding by the Ratchaprapa hydroelectric dam in Surat Thani. Although he helped save many creatures, even more were lost in the deluge. Seub came to realize and began to publicly express the true scale of the environmental impact he had witnessed. Dam construction not only destroys the habitats and food sources for wildlife in the vicinity, it goes right to the heart of the forest by reducing the genetic diversity. The effects are irreversible. Following Ratchaprapa, Seub moved in earnest into public advocacy of conservation issues. He used his official status and his technical and academic experience to begin the fight for wildlife conservation. In 1987, plans were afoot for a new dam in Tongyai Wildlife Sanctuary in Kanchanaburi. Again, sorry for butchering all these pronunciations, folks, but after undertaking new research and gathering more data to back up his case, Seub began a campaign which ultimately proved successful to halt the Namchan Dam for environmental reasons. Seub returned to the Wildlife Conservation Bureau in 1988, and the following year accepted the position of superintendent at one of Thailand's most valuable protected areas, the Hoi Ka Keng Wildlife Sanctuary. So, arriving as superintendent of Hoi Ka Keng Wildlife Sanctuary in 1989, Seub was faced with widespread land encroachment, illegal logging, and wildlife poaching in the forest. He worked tirelessly and wholly with the motive of conservation to combat these threats. However, he was also saddened by the extreme poverty in surrounding communities and very mindful that the economic hardship of local people were contributing to the sanctuary's terrible problems. This is something we've talked about on the show before. Seub pressed ahead with enforcement, conservation research, and community outreach programs because he believed that all three were necessary to decrease the problems of wildlife loss and forest degradation. Realizing that the problems facing Hoi Ka Keng were being largely ignored by senior officials, Seub looked for a better way to protect the sanctuary's forest and wildlife. He turned to UNESCO, an international agency that helps protect important cultural and natural sites around the world. Gathering and compiling all the necessary technical data, Seub began the process of proposing Hoi Ka Keng and Tung Yai Narasan as Thailand's first ever natural World Heritage Site. So next, it goes over a couple of quotes expounding on Seub's beliefs. Quote, "The only place to build hydroelectric dams now is inside conservation land because the forest areas outside the conservation estates have been so badly damaged that they can't function as water catchments. But if we continue to build the dams on conservation land, then conservation in those areas becomes simply meaningless. Conservation land would be just a hollow title." Next quote is, "The forest at Hoi Ka Keng is so pristine, the wildlife habitat so valuable, and yet it's not being protected. If the Royal Forest Department doesn't have the will to conserve it, then what chance is there for the rest of Thailand's pristine forest?" Seub highlighted an inherent conflict of interest he saw with the Royal Forest Department as it considered whether to issue logging concessions inside the Hoi Ka Keng Wildlife Sanctuary. If the Royal Forest Department is mandated to conserve the forest, why do they also have the authority and the will to issue commercial logging permits? It's a no-win situation. If they want to conserve the forest, there should be no logging. If they issue logging concessions, then there can be no conservation. And then the rest of the poster starts talking about, he spoke at local meetings and organized, petitions among local communities. But this is where he starts elaborating on the economic conditions leading to poaching, logging, and so on. He says, quote, "I feel sorry for those people who have no opportunity in Thai society. They are oppressed and exploited. Thailand will be a better and more just place if the privileged, those with opportunities, would sacrifice something for the poor people, the rural people, so that they may be more self-reliant. I would like to see our society based on compassion for the poor." Seub understood better than anyone the issue of inadequate financial security for park staff. Salaries were painfully low and there were no employee insurance. Yet the work was dangerous. Injury and death were real possibilities. To give his staff more motivation to work, Seub did all he could to raise money for a welfare fund that would supplement the staff's salaries and provide insurance. He even shouldered some of the salary burden himself, borrowing money from his mother to make payments to staff because the salary process was so slow. And one more quote, "We pay a lot of attention to conservation, but we have to understand that wildlife conservation is much more than simply keeping wildlife alive. For those who like to put wild animals in a cage and keep as pets, I tell you that nature can raise your pet much better than you can, and I plead to those people who enjoy hunting wild animals or buying wild meat to stop." Community education was a crucial part of Seub's strategy for forest protection. He believed that outreach programs to people around protected forests, particularly programs targeting young children, could be the most effective at stemming the tide of poaching and illegal logging. There he spent a good deal of time and energy giving conservation talks and having discussions with community groups and school children around Hoi Ka Keng, always doing so in public places with utmost humility. So numerous and heartfelt were his appearances that he became something of a local celebrity. Many recall his opening words, "I am here to speak on behalf of the animals who cannot speak for themselves."
Listen, not to be like Hindus rule, but
okay, where are you going with this?
I'm just saying, Buddhists not as vegetarian as you would expect them to be. Those motherfuckers love to eat meat. It's crazy.
Really?
They really do. They eat meat like it's going out of style.
Yeah, I don't know what the reason for that is.
Not valuing the sanctity.
They're like
it's a protein source for people who are too poor to, subsist in these economic conditions, which is exactly the point that he's making, though.
Is Buddhism not just what Protestants are to Catholics to Hindus?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly correct.
So they're wrong and they're going to hell.
Yes, Hinduism. These are Eastern religions, right? So there's like a spirituality to them. There's a
lot of
sacred
overlap.
ritual to them.
There's not a lot of overlap, Austin. Fucking Buddha
no, there's not a lot of overlap.
Was a Hindu.
Yes, there's not overlap. Buddhism is literally a splinter of Hinduism.
Yeah, Buddha, original Buddha is Martin Luther for dharmic religion.
Yeah, Siddharth, the original Buddha, Siddharth. He was a Hindu prince, and he went on a little pilgrimage, and Buddhists basically just believe everything Hindu believes, but the final conclusion for Buddhism is there is no God. It's all the exact same. The cycles of reincarnation, everything is the exact same.
everything is, made up of the same stuff. There's no two things.
Is suicide also similarly taboo in Hindu?
Suicide's taboo everywhere.
I mean, it is taboo everywhere, but is it viewed in the same way as in?
Not as far as I know. I don't think it's especially. It's not anymore. It's not any more taboo to a Catholic. I don't think.
Yeah, I know a lot of Christians think that you go to hell forever if you kill yourself.
I don't think
it's a
you
very
go to hell,
common taboo.
But it's like historically it's condemnation of the soul.
Yeah, listen, you can't be killing yourself. You go to hell.
No, I mean never kill yourself.
Yeah, don't kill yourself.
Never kill yourself. Never.
You're not allowed.
That's why they came up with that rule.
Yeah, I feel like this is important to stress that
we need your productive labor.
What are you gonna do? You're gonna let Israel outlive you? Come on.
On God, you got to stick around for the fall of Israel.
So I need to stress that we've been talking about this guy's suicide so much that this was not so much a heroic act of self-sacrifice to save the animals in Thai forests. It did have that effect, and it was very heroic in effect. But this was a very deeply personal and very, very drastic choice taken by this man because he was literally sending his employees to die in the forest, and nothing was changing, and he felt that he literally had no option left but to kill himself to escape this. And obviously, it made everyone feel really shit about how they were treating, their natural resources. And so it drew attention to that and got a lot of attention, and a lot of good came from it. But I'm not saying by any means that suicide is a good way to save the environment. You know what I mean? This is a very tragic story of
Folks,
how
if you're listening at home, you should kill yourself for your chosen cause.
No. I think the importance of talking about Seub beyond just what he did and how he died and its effects of, getting Hoi Ka Keng and neighboring wildlife sanctuaries recognized as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. These posters are super important because they elaborate on his beliefs and what he wanted to happen. For example, this next poster, he's quoted as saying, "In my opinion, we should not waste time discussing how to use the forest. There's such little forest left that we should no longer use it at all. We should instead keep the remaining forest for the indirect benefits they can provide to us. And it should be clear that the forest can be both conserved and used. But there are two ways to use a forest: direct use and indirect use. Forests that have been gazetted as national parks or wildlife sanctuaries must be kept only for indirect use." So what's meant by indirect use is that the sort of Thai conservation philosophy, because of Seub, because of what he laid out, is that, local communities surrounding the protected wildlife are allowed to go in the forest. They're allowed to forage. They're allowed to take some things out of the forest. They're allowed to even cut some trees if it's for their use. But when people say forest use, what is usually meant by that is massive logging operations. And that is what he is opposed to. He's not opposed to human cultivation, which has gone by very swimmingly for the entirety of human history, but rather he's opposed to this industrial capitalist exploitation of forest resources. Mm-hmm. When I say capitalist, I don't necessarily mean to imply that he was a communist. I don't know that he was, although I will say that Che Guevara is a pretty big icon in Thailand, and that if you walk around, you'll just see people wearing Che Guevara t-shirts and bandanas and stuff.
And because Greg isn't here, I'll make this racist joke for him. But that's also because they got they're just getting all the Chinese knockoffs, dog. All the shit being printed in China is just showing up on their doorstep.
It's that could be it too, but there were also communist insurgents controlling the forest, so I feel
it's Asia, it's Asia.
Yeah,
they have a long history with communism.
The reason why I found out about Seub was actually because I saw at Khao Nong Rum they had this sticker that was a multicolored, Che Guevara-esque revolutionary portrait illustration of Seub that just said Seub, and I was like, who the hell is Seub? And that's when we learned all about him. Another quote that exemplifies his philosophy on this is, "Personally, I'd rather do conservation research than focus entirely on trying to catch poachers and loggers. The people we catch in the forest are just the workers, not the masterminds. Those who are really responsible, the influential people who arrange and gain all the benefit from illegal forest activity, are never caught. The legal process doesn't apply to them, so I feel guilty when we go out and catch only the locals. They claim that we're bullying them, and in some ways they're right. It's my job to protect the forest, but the legal system doesn't allow me to do that, so I consider it more worthwhile to put my energy into conservation research, so I can spread information and raise public awareness. So this is where he sort of reflects on, something that we've remarked on in regards to the in-between state of forest rangers as both the official state arm of authority and punishment, essentially a form of police that cracks down on poor rural communities. But also the kind of people getting into this, if they have really good intentions like Seub, will feel like this pull at either direction of them with regards to their role, because they don't want to arrest the people coming in and logging and poaching, because they know that the people actually causing this to happen will never face any real legal consequences. Like the capitalists, the business interests will never face any kind of real punishment for sending these people to go do this logging, to go do this poaching. And he recognizes that, and which is certainly a part of why he felt so conflicted, that he felt he had no other option in the end. Oh, one more thing is that he remarks that if we want to be successful in conserving these sanctuaries, it is crucial that we also conserve the surrounding forests. This is a big thing that we've touched on, I think, once or twice, where surrounding forests are just as important to the success of protected forest as the protected forest area itself. Like, animals living in protected forest go outside of the forest to forage, to travel, to do all sorts of things.
You gotta go out into the town every once in a while,
Yeah, and
live it up. Get out of the house,
Yeah.
Little squirrel husbands being a bit too, bossy in the.
There are giant squirrels in Thailand. Which I got to
How
see,
big
which was
we
a little
talking?
scary.
How big we talking?
Big or giant
I can't
squirrels?
hear you, Greg. By the way,
Mother.
Hold on a second.
No, we can
Okay.
hear you now, Greg.
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps redirecting our headphones to this thing, which is annoying.
You know what's super cool is when I went and then I disappeared for a minute. Concrete banged into my laptop, and now my $100 laptop, the trackpad no longer works. I cannot use the mouse. You're so lucky I managed
Pick her
to get
up
back
like a
here
softball
with
and
just the
chuck.
keyboard. I am ready to chuck this piece of shit laptop at the drywall.
Yeah, look. As we said at the beginning, Greg's recording situation is being held together by literal tape.
As we said at the beginning, if I were Greg,
I desperately need $2,000. If anybody has $2,000,
I just got paid a lot on Friday. It was great.
Let me hold $2,000.
I don't know if I trust you like that, dog.
Elaborating on this sort of idea that human use of forests should be allowed, but not business use of forests, basically, is he says Hoi Ka Keng should not be closed off to all people. It should not be kept exclusively for wildlife with visits only by select groups of people. I would like everyone to be able to come and visit Hoi Ka Keng and see its wildlife. The experience will help them appreciate the value of the forest here and create some feeling of stewardship, a desire to help protect it. The last couple of posters are just the posters outside of his house, repeating some of the information we've gone over. And, he has some famous poems that he's written that became very popular after his passing. But also something that I want to talk about is how he very correctly identifies who is driving.
Well, he doesn't identify them. I feel he alludes to.
He does allude to it.
They're being. He says that these people can't be named, right? That's what he describes it as, and I think that is that's a meaningful way to say it, right? He said that for a purpose.
Yeah, and also we've got to keep in mind that this is just what fragments of his life have been brought to the English language.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure as an activist, he probably has a much longer and more well-documented history. Things that might not be put on, a memorial site because there may be a bit, because this is a publicly funded memorial. But we've only been able to communicate so much of this man's life and his mission.
It's part of why I think my field experience, while it was still, a field experience, it was very rough and very much in the wilderness. It was very well funded compared to some other field experiences. And it's because his death really did spark like a very like a movement in like valuing these natural resources in these wildlife areas very strongly. Like it's why people call it, Thailand's Yellowstone, where it's like it's very famous to the people of Thailand, and pretty much everyone knows the story of Seub there. But I also say it was similar to Yellowstone in that, it was attempted to just relocate everyone out of the forest to make room for development. This has like two final points I want to go over. So like these events, all the watershed events culminating in Seub's death, gave way to the political climate that ultimately passed the 2007 Community Forest Bill, which was viewed as a very deficient concession to the actual demands of the people, but it is an official legal recognition of the rights of local communities to manage and use their forest that they live in. Not, corporations or logging concessions, but the people themselves. But yeah, one last thing I wanted to touch on though is this concept of community local management of forest land is something that has obviously been a principle of all human societies prior to European civilization's ascendancy, basically. But it's also something that has worked out incredibly well for communist countries, like land reform. Greg, and you can probably speak to this.
Can you fucking hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
What am I speaking to?
We were talking about how, essentially this community land use and land redistribution is not only a very tried and true human history method of ensuring healthy societies, but it's also something that's worked out remarkably well for land reform programs in Cuba and Vietnam and stuff like that,
Yeah, community land reform is one of the best ways to build socialism, in my opinion. I didn't get 90% of the context because now my $100 laptop just shut itself off, so I couldn't hear it for a while.
Greg is hanging on by a thread. You need to smash that laptop on the ground.
As soon as you get to your new place.
The minute you get to your new place, smash that laptop into 1 million
What
pieces.
would that solve? Because it's not like there's a computer waiting for me at the new place.
Well, once you get your new computer, smash this one into as many pieces as possible.
When I get a new computer, I'm gonna take the old one to the ocean and throw it in.
Check blackmail for that one in about 3 months.
Yeah, are you gonna be throwing batteries into the ocean?
I'm gonna tie it to a car battery and throw it in.
This is not in line with the beliefs of Seub.
I think car batteries, I think the ocean needs car batteries as a little treat.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes, it's
Greg has learned nothing from this history lesson.
On the weekends you go out and you get blackout drunk, right? That's like throwing a car battery in the ocean. Sometimes the ocean needs
to live a
little. Yeah, these relieve stress.
It does. I'm big in on let's put some car batteries in the ocean, right? I think that's how we can really heal society.
And if you don't have access to an ocean, go to your local river, lake, estuary.
Local watershed, whatever local watershed you've got.
And if you don't have a car battery, just chuck something toxic.
Do you know any history of communist insurgency in Thailand, Greg? I can't imagine it's been very successful, but do you know it?
It's been completely unsuccessful. I don't know much about it. I just know that they did a FARC thing, like the Colombians, where they just did this low-level guerrilla warfare and then didn't really achieve anything for 30 years.
That's unfortunate.
But yeah, that's kind of the long and short of Thai.
Yeah, I feel like the ultimate conclusion of this being a really underwhelming community forest bill that activists feel didn't go nearly far enough is also very representative of the stark contrast in what needs to be done or what is to be done and what is being done.
What is to be done?
What is to be done? Who can say?
Many are saying.
Many are asking.
Many are asking.
Many are saying this.
Well, I think this wraps up episode 62.
The life and times of Seub Nakhasathien.
I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong, honestly. So again, if you're Thai, please send us an angry voicemail screaming at us in the Thai language.
We have
Please.
a voicemail. Yeah, I forgot about that. No, I don't think we've checked the voicemail in
a year at least.
It's locked away on a Gmail account that I can't access without a
because of your computer. Oh fuck!
Like there's no way I could get in there and play you those off of this fucking piece of shit laptop.
Yeah. So, in a couple months when Greg has a new computer, we'll finally listen to all of your angry.
Well, we can just sign into the Google Voice.
No, it's my personal email account.
You don't give us access to it?
No.
You don't trust us like that?
It's the email that has all the stuff on it.
All the stuff.
All my subscriptions.
Okay, I see.
Also, look at this cool hoodie I got.
That bangs. That
right?
bangs, dude.
All right, so to wrap up.
Hey, before we go, everybody, if this is a public episode, I want to thank all of you for listening this far. I don't know how many people actually make it here, but if you enjoyed our content, maybe you should give us $5. And then you'll get even more content from us, and eventually I'll be able to record like a fucking professional again. It has been like 2 months of me being unprofessional as fuck in my recordings because I'm like on my phone or on a piece of shit laptop. So
I fucked up in my conversion.
He fucked up so bad it made me look like an idiot at the beginning of the podcast because Austin was like, how much is 5 baht? And I was like, it's probably about like 150 to 200 baht if I remembered the conversions you taught me earlier correctly. Never doubt an Asian motherfucker ever again in your life, bitches. I was on the money.
Yeah, I think I fucked up and added too many zeros.
Yeah, it's 170 baht. $5 is 170 baht.
All right, well, start paying us in baht, folks.
Yeah, give us 170 baht a month, pretty please.
If you subscribe to the Patreon, you get access to a blooper reel every month, a bonus episode every month. We do movie reviews. And lots of other fun little activities. We also have a blackmail tier at $10 where whenever anything embarrassing happens in any of our lives, that's 340 baht. You should have had to type in that conversion.
Yeah.
170 times 2 is 340
Yeah. 341.9 baht, but
Anyway.
As of the time of speaking.
To us ever, we
posted there immediately. Last night we posted pictures of boys' night. It's Labor Day weekend, folks. We hit Charlotte football. Watched a soccer game where Charlotte scored 0 points.
Oh.
Atlanta whooped our ass. They got 1 point. I fucking hate soccer. It's not a good sport. It's boring to watch. Nothing happens. It's like a 90-minute game. And like maybe 1 or 2 things happen. It's crazy. Like at least in football, every 5 minutes somebody gets hit really hard.
Yeah.
And that's all you need.
I think soccer is big in Thailand though. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't be alienating.
They're probably playing cricket. They're not playing soccer.
I don't think they're playing cricket, man. I don't think that's like a Thai thing.
Yeah, no, soccer is the most popular sport in Thailand. Sorry, you don't want to. Let's not alienate our Thai listeners of this episode.
If it's their most popular sport, where are you guys? Where's y'all's fucking championship trophies? Come on.
Damn.
Well, they've got a lot of success in the Southeast Asian games.
Don't give a fuck. Do the World Games, huh? Where's your World Cup standings, you fucking loser?
Oh, wait, no. What am I saying? Muay Thai. Muay Thai? Is that how you say it?
Muay Thai.
Muay Thai.
Yeah, that's true. They invented that shit.
They invented that shit and
they did invent it.
That's their most iconic sport. What am I saying? They're world champions at it because they invented it.
I know somebody was putting you in a pretzel out there.
Like a lot of other Asian countries, they're big into badminton. Badminton's always.
Is that because they want to be like the English?
I would assume it has to do with colonialism, much as everything else in this country episode has.
Is badminton an English sport?
Yeah, dude, that's a rich, white, posh person sport.
I had no clue. Well, growing up, I've only ever seen brown people play it. I've never seen a white person play badminton before.
That's a cultural export of the British Empire, Chief.
Yeah, I mean,
badminton.
I mean,
the shuttlecock.
Yeah, the main playing piece is called the shuttlecock. Of course it's colonialism.
It was literally developed during the British Raj.
Okay.
It was developed in India during the Raj. That's why.
Okay, so it's, yeah.
So growing up, it was always such a big thing. Like, my dad, when I was little, before we played tennis, he bought us little shuttlecocks and, like, the badminton things. I played badminton all the time when I was little. It's not even a colonial export. It created in the colonized lands by the British.
Yeah.
It's not even an export. They're doing that shit in-house.
Yeah.
Cut to the Ville quote. I love that Ville quote, by the way, what John said on Red Connections. That the British Empire was an Indian empire administered from London. That shit goes so hard. I say that shit like 3 times a day, unironically.
True.
That's just because I talk about colonialism a lot.
Yeah. A lot to talk about. It's the reason our entire world is the way it is.
Yeah. You're probably not hearing this because this is usually going to be something that we put in the blooper reel on Patreon. But if you do hear it, it's because I included this segue. So, once again, thank you everybody for listening. Austin is streaming very often on the Twitch at twitch.tv/Guerrilla Radio Show. You know what? In a couple days, probably by the time you hear this, if it is Wednesday, that means that we are going to be doing a cooking stream. So we'll be streaming on Twitch, cooking up a nice big meal.
I gotta get back into doing that when I get a computer again.
Yeah, I got a big, nice kitchen, dude. It's so cool.
I got a Victorian kitchen now.
Oh yeah.
We'll be making soups and shit while the snow falls outside. It's like a movie out there.
Very nice.
Anyway, please give me money, please, 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 money, please, money, please.
Bye, everyone.